we have come to an end to this conference, and we will start the closing plenary soon. And I will give it to Julio Ahmadi as the moderator for this afternoon session. The screen is yours, Julio. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zico, for passing it on to me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the closing session of the Forest Displacement and Urban Management Conference conducted by SWACA Indonesia and also RDI UREF in the support of the Royal Academy of Engineering under the Frontiers of Engineering Development scheme. So everyone, we're entering the peak part of the conference, which is today. So please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Julio Castor Achmadi. At the moment, I'm the coordinator of legal empowerment in SWACA Indonesia, and I will be serving as the moderator of the closing discussion. For your information, this discussion will be recorded for documentation purposes, so please make sure that you are aware about turning on your camera in front of everyone here. For the flow of the discussion, we will be having one reporter who will report on the main discussion points for each session that we have conducted during the first day up until today. It will be presented by Nino Fiarastiwi from RDI UREF, and then also a closing statement as a response for the report made by Mbak Nino from Rizka Argadianti Rahma as a representative from SWACA Indonesia. And after that, we can close the discussion, and hopefully everyone can get a lot of information, also insights, while also improving our network. So everyone, without any further ado, I will pass on to the reporter. Mbak Nino, please go ahead.
Thank you, Julio. Hello. Thank you so much for joining this session. I'm Nino Fiarastiwi from RDI UREF. As you may know, RDI UREF is one of the organizers of this conference. And I'm here taking this session because I was assigned by SWACA to be a rapporteur for our conference. So here I am, the different takeaways and highlights of presentation from all of our great speakers. Yeah, some takeaways and highlights that I noted might be different with takeaways and highlights on your notes, but that's a beautiful side of a conference. I think that everyone gets to learn something according to what they need and interested. And before I start with my notes, I want to use this opportunity to thank every speaker, participants, and organizers for this conference. I personally found the atmosphere of this conference enjoyable, and I salute every presenter with their presentations. Thank you so much. And this is just a mini conference held by small organizations with the help from great people from other organizations. However, we thank that we are very grateful, we are very thankful that 366 people are registered for this conference. And for the feedback, 82 fill out feedback forms, in which 85% of them from Indonesia. We are in Indonesia anyway. So for that, and for having you joining this conference from the day one until now, actually, it's an honor for us, and thank you so much. Again, because this is only a small conference, during these 3 days, we only had one panel for each time, unlike ordinary conference, with several parallel sessions. However, the solo session actually allowed us to be involved and focus on each panel. And all presenters received good attention from numerous attendants as they deserve, because sometimes in an ordinary conference, one panel is just attended by very few people. So this is what I like from this conference, and I hope this is what you like from this conference. And I also like the discussion atmosphere. They were lively, friendly, and very supportive. I hope this is a model of our conference that I would like to join. And thank you all of you. Thank you for us, and thank you for making this possible. For my talk today, reporter of the session that we have been joining for the last 3 days. 3 days. Okay. I divided the highlight by each day. I assembled or compiled all takeaways and categorized them under topics rather than highlighting insight from each presenter. The reason to do so is because several presenters actually discussed and agreed upon similar ideas. So let's start with my observation. Yeah, day one, Tuesday, 7 September 2021, we have two sessions. First is panel one, urban refugee management, and one thematic discussion, right to the city. My takeaway is that several speakers agreed that city has to be given a more prominent role for refugee management. And the reflection on the role of the city are as follows. First, it is critical point that the critical point for good humanitarian responses. I'm reading my notes, so if you find my eyes is not on you, sorry. Critical points for good humanitarian responses are that cities are full of complexities, but at the same time, it offers opportunities. Hence, engagement with complexities that are centered on people approach is important for a better living for all. So city has to be given more prominent role for refugee management in the future. Yeah? And collaboration across stakeholders is the way to deal with complexities in the cities. Thus, innovations and models of collaborations are needed. And this is, I think, the homework for researchers, that we need to build models and thinking about innovation that can gather stakeholders in the city to provide a better living for refugees and also for the local host communities. Yeah. And the third is that urban refugee settings, rather than camp settings, are preferable for refugee management, since urban areas provide more opportunities for refugees and asylum seekers. That's the takeaway from the role of the cities and the importance to give bigger role for cities in urban refugee management. Another point of reflection is on the international community's roles and national government. The first takeaway is that the continuity of resettlement should be encouraged and also promote safe voluntary repatriation to the home country for refugees who wish to do so. And urging the financial contribution, the international communities need to urge countries who that do not admit refugees to support or to have financial contribution. And also the importance of promoting the principle of self-reliance for refugees. This is applicable for host countries. Yeah, host governments should encourage to allow refugees to engage in income generating activities. And the third takeaway is that the urging the non-signatory countries and the international community to adhere to the 1951 Convention on the Protocols and recommend the countries to have a legal framework on refugee management with a holistic perspective beyond service providing. So this is one of the long-term solution, and urge the government to apply the Global Compact on Refugees, or GCR, to deal with refugee issues by involving refugees as national development agents rather than just object or subjects for development. Yeah, but they also have the potency to be the national development agent. One speaker talked about the Malaysian case. And in the Malaysian case, it is imperative for the government to create a holistic approach to policy making for refugees and asylum seekers to ensure no contradicting and inflicting policies. And the last on the reflection on international communities' roles and national government is that the importance of higher education access for higher education as a complementary pathway for refugees resettlement. I think that's very interesting. And there are some reflections on refugee protection and management. The first is that to urge multi-stakeholder collaboration to better protection for refugee children, urging the access to healthcare for refugees, women refugees, double vulnerabilities should be recognized. And there is a call for a safe space for refugee women and in order to have this safe space is by increasing their involvement in the society. And the international community needs to acknowledge the roles of civil society in responding to voluntary and forced migration in the absence of the government's participation. Yeah, those are the takeaways from speakers today one. And after those presentations, we had a networking session using an online platform where all conference participants could join to get to know each other and to advertise or post information about their organization and project, or just to satisfy their curiosity about the project of organization that joining this conference. So we have this platform, and this activity was also to replace actually welcoming reception or welcoming dinner that we usually have in physical conference, in ordinary conference. So I hope you had a great time at that networking session as I did. Yeah, some of you joining the session and we get to know each other at that time. Thank you. So the second day, I'm moving on to the second day. The second day we have a panel discussion moving toward beyond resettlement is the theme, and we have a thematic session 2, space and place in everyday life of the refugees and host communities. The point of takeaway 1 is that the effect and opportunities of prolonged displacement toward refugees across the globe. The first takeaway on that categorized is that prolonged displacement toward refugees across the globe has created the situation of protracted transit period. And the fact that less developing countries are currently hosting more refugees than in the previous era. So, hosting more refugees than the developed countries. That is the situation that is now happening due to the prolonged displacement. The second is that the lack of legal framework for refugees protection in Indonesia and Malaysia has led to the unfulfillment of fundamental human rights for refugees, such as access to work, access to income generating rights, and also access to education and access to healthcare service. And the absence of global and national arrangements for a long-term solution for refugees problem is also being recognized by several speakers. One speaker also mentioned that to help the host countries to overcome the reluctance to accept refugees is actually by providing answers that refugee population benefit host countries rather than become a burden. So if you want to argue to the host government that having refugees will not put them in a risk, economic risk or social risk, is that we have to have more research on it. That's mentioned by one, and I'm agree with that. And however, we also speakers are also acknowledge that no single solution is enough to tackle the decreasing number of resettlements globally. So a mixture of solutions is needed in that context. The second point are about the engaging the advocacy work for refugees. The first takeaway is that international communities should give bigger recognition to and collaborate with refugee-led organizations. So it's the importance of acknowledging and working with refugee-led organizations. And refugee communities should be involved in the policy making on refugees. That is opinion argument that was offered by one speaker. And the non-refugee advocates have to reflect constantly on their own bias and privilege in providing services for refugees. This is also one takeaway that struck me because, yeah, sometimes this is something that not all non-refugee advocates reflect on this. Yeah, so this is one takeaway that I took from our one speaker. He said that the non-refugee advocates have to reflect constantly on their own bias and privilege in providing services for refugees, and I am agreeing that opinion. So, and another takeaway is that the refugee communities offer a plea for bigger public support for access to higher education for refugees. It will be possible if the public and also donors, of course, listen to this plea for access to higher education for refugees. And one speaker presented a research of the minority groups advocacy model. He said that the sub-politics process actually can effectively empower and give voices to individuals who do not have authoritative, legislative, or financial power. And this sub-politics can work through public street arts, murals, and documentary film. This speaker didn't talk about refugee in the context of refugee, but his insight was more about the minority group advocacy and how the sub-politics actually works in the field. This is one point that we have to reflect on. And on the social integration and social settings in Indonesia, Iraq, and Germany, several speakers talk about social integration and social settings in Indonesia, Iraq, and Germany. The takeaways are, one speaker found that most national online media in Indonesia still stereotype refugees by presenting refugees as threats to national security and a problem to urban management or vulnerable groups that need help. So it put them in unfavorable light. Yeah. And another researcher said that for Hazaran refugees in Indonesia, religion still plays a major role in the negotiation process for the interaction with the Indonesian communities. However, the interaction is low, and it is caused by barriers such as language, behaviors, and culture. Two speakers actually, give example the situation in Germany. In Germany, the Arabian refugees practice creational dialogue to find commonalities and to support each other. And this collective efforts of newcomers and locals is an open-ended process that includes mobilizing the groups to find a common interest, empower each other, and move forward together. This is very good, I think. The same thing happened at Syrian Kurd refugee camps in the eastern region of Iraq. There, the residents have a better situation in the refugee camps and a strong connection due to similarities such as language. And being together is also a good method to ease the burden of waiting. So it's a very good for mental health. And one speaker discussed about the digital media as a transnational experience for refugees to become, and the digital media has become a transnational settlement support, which provide refugees with connection in relational, economic, and cultural sense. So they will not be losing the community, and they will not be losing the cultural sense that they have identity. And it has supported refugees to build connection during their displacements. So social media play important roles for resiliency. The third theme of this takeaway is about the sharing space and place. And I'm taking this from speakers discussing about Indonesia, Germany, and Egypt situation. First, that accommodation plays an important role in refugees' well-being and for survivors of domestic violence. We tend to think that accommodation is just a place to live. But those researchers prove that accommodation is important for their refugees' well-being and survivor of domestic violence or survivor of conflict or crisis, because accommodation can promote a sense of security and freedom. Therefore, an architectural design that is responsive to survivors' needs and equipped with public facilities and has a certain level of privacy is what refugees and people of survivors of domestic violence need. In Tübingen, Germany, one researcher present a research paper that a citizen building cooperative creates quality urban neighborhood and social integration. The local community in Germany is invited to contribute intellectually and financially through something that so-called city talks and neighborhood workshop for refugee housing development. The local explored the ideal condition during that workshop. The locals explore the ideal condition on how the neighborhood would live together with refugees or newcomers. And the refugee housing development also provide pathways for refugees' social integration and also economic opportunities. And the effective element to inclusion of refugees in the country is that to make them feel welcome. So the two presenters from Germany are using Germany as the cases, as their case study, have the same opinion that the effective element to inclusion of refugees in the country, in that case Germany, is to make them feel welcome. One speaker present a research paper taking the case of Egypt. Refugees create translocal connections and intra-neighborhood connections that never existed before in Egypt, in Cairo to be precise. The hyperlocal activity carried out by the refugees has created special relationships, and the activities also affect the socio-economic capacities of the city. So sharing space and place in Egypt has good contribution for the socio-economic capacities of the city. In addition, faith-based structures such as religious facilities are also important nodes for refugees because those buildings play roles in receiving and dispersing refugees to other areas. So this is something that all researchers maybe should start taking notes, that faith-based structures is not only community centers, but also an instrument for social integration. And the one presenter gave us an insight about the influx of newcomers that could harm the landscape of a place. He took the case of Ubud in Indonesia, in Bali, where the influx of tourists has converted agricultural and traditional lands into leisure facilities for economic opportunities. So from this, we can learn that new public policy should also think about the sustainability, environmental sustainability when newcomers come and we want to build together as a welcome gesture, yeah, for the newcomer. That's the takeaway for the second day. I'm moving on to today's session. Today's session is very special because we get to know the aspiration, the motivation, and the life lessons that those refugees has been gathered during their displacement, during the experience as a displaced people. Yeah, the first session is about young and resourceful. The theme is about young and resourceful, navigating forced displacement as digital native. And we learned that the experience of young displaced people as digital natives in building online movement on social justice. So we learned their experience. So actually, how do they juggle propelling the digital movement and protecting themselves from backlash and surveillance? As we know that in this era, in this cancel culture era, and during this surveillance era, it's very difficult to have a movement, especially online. Everything is there, stay there forever, they said. So how do these young people juggling with their digital movement for social justice, while at the same time protecting themselves? So this is what the takeaways for these first sessions. As funding is important to support a movement, the young people, the young activists from refugee communities also take notes on the funding. And they use social media to build constructive dialogue with others, especially for more people to know about their initiatives and get funding by connecting to donors. So they have this clever way to advocate themselves as the digital natives. Yeah. The second is that apart from social media, podcasts, they said, are also great platform to share the stories of refugees and inspire people that there are various ways to be involved in and advocate the issue. And the speakers highlight that it is crucial for refugees themselves to be chosen as the one sharing stories and perspectives. This is about the ownership and belonging of the ownership of the issue. Yeah, as the information would be better through hearing directly from the refugees, as they can tell more than just the issue, but also about their personal experience. It's not only about the issue, but also their personal experience. So it's maybe they talk about the depth of the issue that they can discuss. This is also a homework for researcher and also for funding communities, that we have to listen to them and also to put the agency on them, to return back the agency to them. Yeah. However, it is also crucial for public to understand that initiatives that can be done to help refugees actually do not always involve money. That the simplest and closest thing that can be done is to educate ourselves about the issue of refugees, advocate the policies toward refugees, and increase awareness by carrying out campaigns, doing voluntary work, and then maybe donating something. So they said that the initiative starts from simple things. And all speakers encouraging youth to take on more roles, refugee youth, yeah, to take on more roles despite all their limitations. And they invite the youth to do things they love, build a sense of belonging in the host country, get connected, and learn about the culture. This is also the key. At the same time, as far as I remember, this is also the key for social integration. Yeah, getting to know each other, getting used to each other's culture. So that's all. They're also the key for social integration. I just joined the last session today, special session 2, Voices of Refugees, with the theme of if I were to describe myself in one word. We have 4 speakers who live in Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines shared their visions. And they describe themselves in one word and then explaining to us what the power behind those carefully chosen words. And it was fascinating to listen to them dismantling the words, and we got to understand their challenges, struggles, and the most important is their resilience to overcome their difficulties while still trying to empower others. I think that's very noble. And to be honest, I cried myself off during that session because it was so touching, that session. So their chosen words are, for the 4 speakers, their chosen words were runner, sensible, leader, and outstanding. And all speakers shared a same message about positive mind, positive words. No matter how the results are, we can see the world differently. Very beautiful. And on the most important, all speakers agree that on the most important thing to have for refugees is legal rights and also having fulfillment of rights. All speakers agree that as refugees, they have many problems regarding to rights and also limitation of mobility, for example, access to government services, administrative problems, mental health problems, discrimination from the host communities, and the limitation for the right
forms of racial discrimination.
Oh, sorry.
Well, interestingly,
okay. Rights to speak and access to education for girls. One speaker, Mr. Rafli, reflected refugees in any Southeast Asia country, refugees in Philippines are luckier because they have freedom to work without work permits and rights, because the Philippines is one of the signatory countries for the refugee convention. Still, there are challenges such as discrimination based on their status as refugees in the Philippines. And as a conclusion, all speakers highlighted the importance of empowering others as a self-healing method, a contribution to the community, and to live a positive life personally. That's all takeaways that I can take from discussion, but I want to share something also from you, that we organizer gather some positive comments from you, and I will read some of it. First, positive comments from participants. First, I get opportunity to increase my knowledge regarding the topic from many wonderful speakers just for free. Thank you for Ryan for sponsoring us so we can have a free conference. And the second is this event is necessary so that understanding related to ASR in Indonesia becomes more comprehensive and the role of many parties in the advocacy process. And the third comment is it gives ample opportunity to people across the world to voice their opinion on an open platform. Thank you for conducting the session that are insightful for handling refugee situation in Indonesia. With this, it will be beneficial if we can learn from practitioners who already make several things on the field too. We would also love to listen to the practitioners, yeah. And it will be better if government institutions also invited. I think so too. All the speakers spoke in one only perspective, which is development perspective. It would be better to intertwine with security perspective. We will have another conference there. Suggestion for future topics from participants. First, role and engagement of the private sector in urban refugee management. Second, more about intersectionality. Women experience, yeah. Okay. The third is about big data. This is a new field and a new research method. Very good to explore. Government approach for the urban refugee issue. And the usual, livelihood, child protection, education. It's not the usual, it's everlasting issues, I guess. And I have an interest on FBO, faith-based organization, because several refugees are being persecuted by their religious identity. How exactly, from principles to practical technical approach, does a religious organization could provide peace and assistance for them without abandoning their faith-based principle? Question mark. I read many articles about it, but want to hear the stories from the real actors on the field. Me too. Another suggestion is access to work for refugee, and then compare and contrast different asylum policies, and then refugee area planning. You mean urban planning, development planning? Maybe, yeah, maybe what the participant means is that development planning or urban planning, refugee area planning. And the next is the collaboration between RLOs in Asia Pacific, and then entrepreneurship by refugees, collaboration between local society and refugee, and the relationship between different communities of refugees in Indonesia. This is very interesting. Hopefully more diverse representative from countries that host refugees such as Thailand, the Philippines, etc. And not the last suggestion. Another suggestion is refugees who fled climate change or climate-induced refugees. That is very interesting. And because that's a future problem, yeah, climate-induced refugees. And another suggestion is opportunities for collaboration and how to support the refugee initiatives. And then safe city for women. Very good. Global identity in mobility. And others, there are message that I have to deliver to you is, I'm looking forward for next year conference. I don't know whether RDI, URF, and SWAKA will help another conference, but I hope when we do, you are still with us. And we will try to have the recorded video to be uploaded on YouTube. So please wait. We need to have some agreements first before the recorded video will be uploaded to YouTube. Thank you so much. So Julia, over you.
Thank you very much, Mbak Nino. Those were amazing points that you have mentioned, as well as a lot of things for us to do as, you know, civil society members, whether we are in organizations in affiliation with our organization or in our individual capacity. So I think those key points and key takeaways from the discussion that have been conducted during day 1 up until day 3 have been very, very insightful for all of us. And surely there are a lot of follow-up points as well. Before I go up to the wrap-up points from Mbak Nino's report, there is someone from the chat box who would like to speak briefly and share a few thoughts with everyone here. So Leticia Lemester, please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Julio, and thank you very much, Bu Nino, for sharing those thoughts. I'm Leticia. I've had a chance to interact with many of you over the last 3 days, and I wanted to take the opportunity to share 4 thoughts with everyone. Firstly, it's not an easy feat to organize a 3-day conference over Zoom. And yet the conference has been interactive, it's been innovative, it's used different platforms that's really engaging. Especially the last 2 sessions today, they were really creative, very well organized. The session organized by Sarah, the breakout groups, the use of Miro, the use of the networking the first day to keep people engaged at that level is really remarkable. My second point is that I'm truly impressed with the cross-regional collaboration between the organizers, between RDI, URF, SWAKA, AFR, MMC. And if I'm missing an organizer, please forgive me. It's very motivating and hopeful to see that cross-regional collaboration. And of course, with the partners that were in the Middle East and in Europe and so forth. Especially when during this pandemic, many of our worlds have shrunk. They've become smaller when we are in our rooms or in our homes. And yet this space and this collaboration has really widened everyone's platforms. The third point I wanted to share is that this conference has been exemplary in providing voice, in providing space, and providing the recognition of individuals in their experiences and celebrating people's achievements. Oftentimes the stories that we hear can be difficult, and yet I felt a sense of hope, oftentimes positivity. Really the recognition is what I left each session with. And then fourthly, and this is more of a personal note, I'm a doctoral student based in Jakarta, and I'm researching refugee education in Indonesia. And at times it can be a very lonely experience being a researcher, doing your data collection. And it has been truly eye-opening to meet many of you and engage in these conversations, to meet like-minded individuals, to meet people who are truly passionate and working tirelessly in their chosen field. So I look forward to keeping in touch with many of you, and thank you again to the organizers.
Thank you very much, Leticia, for your kind input and also sharing to us. It's definitely very heartwarming, of course, for the organizers to have heard about your experience during your participation in this conference. So thanks again. So everyone, in the interest of time, I would like to wrap up the points that have been mentioned by Nino. Just to make sure that, because Mbak Nino presented it in the day-to-day basis, I will be concluding all of that. Hopefully that is able to encapsulate everything that have been mentioned as well by Mbak Nino. While I'm doing that, I will also ask the organizer to please kindly present the graphic illustration that we have provided to better inform about the flow of the discussion and then the substances in a more friendly manner, so everyone can see the illustration and understand better. So before I start, maybe I would like to, yeah. Okay, thank you everyone. Please feel free to look at the screen as well as to listening to the wrap-up points that I will share now. So I think it is to be agreed that refugees are humans, therefore they also have the same needs as all of us here, to have our human rights be respected, protected, and also fulfilled. This is also including to the right to the city that have been discussed in large within the conference, as well as for the refugees who are in urban settings. While we face a lot of problems, be it the refugee themselves and the civil society working for the better fulfillment of refugee rights in Indonesia and beyond, it means that there is a lot of room to collaborate and then create improvement. The synchronized efforts that is made by multi-stakeholder collaborations, including refugees and asylum seeker community, civil society organizations, media and journalists, the government, international community, and lastly, young people, would lead to a better condition for refugee rights protection and fulfillment while they are waiting for a longer-term solution. This is also very important because this collaboration will strengthen the social cohesion in the society. So as has been mentioned before, the social integration is one of the longer-term solution for refugees in many of the host countries. So if we can improve the social cohesion between the refugee communities as well as the host communities, then we can create a more inclusive and tolerant world. It is also very imperative to acknowledge that there are needs for longer-term solutions, such as addressing the right to a city, as mostly refugees in Indonesia are living in the urban settings, and then also to address the livelihood opportunities that have been discussed by a lot of people. And most of the researches that have been conducted around the livelihood opportunities see it as one of the most important aspects that have to be addressed properly by the government in the host countries to increase as well the resilience of the refugee community to be able to sustain for themselves. And then a stronger human rights-based and people-centered approach in the legal framework. It is one of the main problem. I think it is also the root problems of many discriminations and also rights violations that have been happening towards refugees in Indonesia. So if we have a strong human rights-based and people-centered approach legal framework, we can address holistically about the problems that are being faced by refugees in many, many countries. From the third day itself, we also think that it is very important to create the meaningful participation and also to involve refugees in policy-making process, because they are the people with lived experience of displacement. So it is only fair to have them be involved inside of the discussion that affect them directly. And then as a community, we also have to recognize that there are people inside of the refugee community themselves who are at heightened risk. For example, women, children, unaccompanied minor, elders, people with minority faith, and for example, people with minority sexual orientation that needs better protection because they face layered discrimination. It is also very good to seek practices that have been conducted within the region, for example, like Southeast Asia or even beyond. For example, in Europe, in Australia, we can see the good practices and examples that we can try and adopt in our own context for better protection for refugee rights. And lastly, more supports are needed to support the initiatives made by the people with lived displacement, especially with a lot of digital movement for social justice that has been conducted by a lot of young people in Indonesia, especially refugees and asylum seekers themselves. By supporting them, we improve the resilience of the refugees and empower not only the refugee community themselves, but also empower Indonesian society to be able to accept that there are diversity in our society. So we also lastly have to increase our own awareness. So we have to be aware about what is happening around us, especially with refugees and asylum seekers that are slowly but surely creating a stronger social compassion. So I think that is the wrap up points that I would like to share with all of you. Hopefully it can some sort of conclude the conference that we have. At the moment, I'm going to pass this on to Rizka Argadianti Rahma as WAKA's representative to be able to share her response about this conference discussions. Thank you. Please go ahead, Rizka.
Thank you, Julio and Mbak Nino. And good afternoon, distinguished speakers, moderators, and guests. Thank you very much to be in this RDI, URAF, and SWAKA, Forced Displacement and Urban Management Conference 2021. Thank you very much to share your thoughts, suggestions, and even come up with the follow-up. I know that some maybe effective follow-up will be happen if we have it offline in the lobby. That's why we call it lobbies, and it's way more effective, some sort of. And this is all to create a better city for those who are forcibly displaced. And we are honored to organize this conference and meet you all virtually. Lately, we have seen conflicts erupted, which creates forced displacement of the people from one country to another to seek for a better life. A person who forcibly leaves their own country and entering an unknown country for them, a country which has different system, culture, and its people as well. Some of the country did not recognize the integration of refugee into their system, just like Indonesia. But that doesn't mean as part of international community, they can just push back the people who needs protection. These countries have a shared responsibility, as our rapporteur also mentioned, and Julio also mentioned, humanitarian actions, financial contributions, while also promoting resettlement and, if possible, a self-voluntary repatriation if a refugee wishes to do so. Allowing social cohesion is also important. It is creating opportunity to engage income-generating activities, which able to create economic interaction between Indonesian and refugees. We've seen this in so many places in regions also, in Indonesia also. Thus, the idea of urban setting is more benefiting for both communities, the host communities and also the refugee communities, rather than creating camps or even a spatial island. We can see what happened in Nauru and Manus. And so what we need to support above mentioned idea, it is the system actually. The system itself is not only on the ground of socio-cultural approach, but also structural or regulative with the human rights approach. It is better to be prepared rather than having a chaotic response, which could lead to violating both national or international law, or even worse, could lead to harmful results. In this conference, we learned that there are many positive practices across the world that can be adapted. Julie also said, and maybe with adjustment to have it relevant to our own country context. Overall, these sounds like a huge task to do. Yes, it is. But we shouldn't have to work alone. With this conference, as I mentioned earlier, we have come up with amazing thoughts, brilliant ideas, and other important thing is networking. Leticia also mentioned about how creative it was, the conference, to engage all the people, to engage I've seen new people, and I also just knew Leticia from this conference as well, and other people in this conference as well. And especially during this pandemic, we have more obstacle on our road. Surely by establishing strong network, we are able to communicate, coordinating, which leads to work together. This is what important too. And in this particular human rights discourse, actually, we don't have many allies. Therefore, we have to have a solid network, and teamwork is what we needed. Lastly, I would like to say that refugee is us. What we need today, those who are forcibly displaced also needed education, housing, healthcare, and surely food. As a human being, we need a good place to live and to grow. We need a social interaction, and somehow we made mistakes too, right? And we all have potential to do good things. If what we do currently is not happening by now, it might be in the future. So it can becomes our legacy for the promotion of human rights in our own country. So I thank you very much for your active participation. This is surely not the end. This is an ongoing process. We'll see you again in the future in other collaborative works. Thank you, stay healthy, and have a good day ahead.
Thank you very much, Rizka, for your amazing response to the conference, as well as marking the end of our event. So I think we couldn't agree more with the points that have been mentioned by Rizka. Just before we close the conference and I conclude the discussion today, I would like to ask your participation, if you are willing to open your camera, and then we will give a round of applause for ourselves. So I will be waiting for you to open the camera. Again, if you don't want to, then you don't need to, but feel free to open it, and then I will wait for a bit before we start the applause for ourselves. Okay, so people are starting to open their camera. Maybe 3 more seconds. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you, everyone. Please give ourselves a round of applause. Thank you so much for your participation and also support on this conference. Okay, everyone, we would like to extend our appreciation to our conveners, which are Mixed Migration Center, Advocates for Refugees Singapore, and also Oikumene Studios for their extraordinary effort in helping to organize these efforts. Those people are here as well. So if you want to exchange contacts, you want to exchange information and further collaboration, just go ahead and ask them their number away so you can contact them in the future. And then also to our esteemed speakers, academics, practitioners, and refugee friends, thank you so much for sharing your experience and also invaluable knowledge in these sessions. We, of course, would like again to thank you, the Royal Academy of Engineering, for the support in this conference under the Frontiers of Engineering for Development C. Please visit and follow the organizers, RDI, UREF, and also SWACA's social media as well as sites, and also for our other conveners as have been put inside of the chat box for all of you to access. And then please do not hesitate to contact all of us if you want to engage more with our work and then want to contribute to the better protection and fulfillment of refugee rights wherever you are. Again, thank you so much for your continuous participation for the last 3 days. We highly appreciate it. And we hope that this is only the first conference out of many in the future. Have a great evening and thank you again. See you and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.